If you watched my weekend preview video, you would have heard me talk about an F3 driver by the name of Arvid Lindblad. He is really good and is proving that he may potentially be the next big talent, and this has led me to think, how does he compare to the other F3 talents? And while looking, I stumbled upon two names, Lance Stroll and Max Verstappen. Why I highlighted these two is because they went from European F3 directly to F1 instead of going to F2 or GP2 in the case of Max. Now, of course, the intended ladder for these Nepo babies is to go from karting, F4 equivalent, F3, F2, and then F1. However, clearly these two were so talented they just skipped straight to F1 due to this said talent, and while it may be right for some people, this is a discussion of controversy since the jump from F3 cars to F1 is so massive and can be dangerous. But, like I said, they are that talented, so why waste time when you can have greatness immediately? So let's discuss the idea of F3 drivers going straight to F1 and if it is such a bad thing. Let me put it into perspective. F3 is a series that mainly consists of teenagers of rich parents, and it is a step of getting into F1. These cars, because the majority of drivers are young, are much more slower than F1, and the cars are supposed to get faster as you move up the ladder. So, the gap from F3 cars to F1 cars around the Circuit Catalunya, for example, is about 15 seconds, so it's a ginormous gap. It's like giving a 16-year-old who just got his license a 2012 Honda Civic, so when you put that kid into an F1 car without properly progressing up the ladder, then it's like giving that same kid after only a year of driving a Lamborghini. This is obviously unnatural since not only is this extremely dangerous, but it can ruin a driver since by jumping too quickly, talent wouldn't be able to nurture and develop, but instead it will halt or decline. Again, imagine giving that same 16-year-old kid a geometry test, and after he passes it, you give him a rocket science test. It's too big of a jump and it can ruin them. But once in a blue moon, this will be possible. There will be a kid that can drive the Lamborghini perfectly, and he would be able to solve the rocket science test, and we call these kids Max Verstappen, or the son of a billionaire. So let us look at examples of Max Verstappen or son of a billionaire and determine if there should be some rule banning the immediate jump of F3 drivers to F1 directly. Before we start, to count from going to F3 straight to F1, the driver obviously skipped F2. However, when I say F2, I'm also going to mean GP2, Formula 3000, and Formula Renault 3.5, since at one point, they were the modern F2 system back then, and in the case of Formula Renault 3.5, the cars were barely slower than GP2, so I'm counting it as above F3. Oh, and no sports car racing. When I mean going from F3 to F1, I mean it, so no Ocon, Wehrlein, or Schumacher. So let's look at successful F3 drivers straight to F1, and obviously we have Max Verstappen. Now, this may be a bit unfair, since Max is the definition of generational. However, he should still be mentioned since he did do the jump as well as have the performances to back it up despite his inconsistency, and nowadays we obviously see how good he is since he is a 3-time champion and potentially 4-time, with many more being touted for him. Next, we have Valtteri Bottas, and he impressed massively in GP3 and was said to be the next big talent, and in 2013 when Williams fired Bruno Senna, he got the call-up, skipping GP2 and going straight to F1, and nowadays he is considered a great driver with 10 F1 wins. However, he did lack that factor to make him champion, with his worst flaw being his defending. Next up, we have another Finn, being Kimi Räikkönen, and talk about a legend. Stayed in karting for a while because he had no funding. He got funding, now he could compete in cars, wins in dominant fashion, and only does 23 car races before getting the call-up to race for Sauber in F1. He just completely speed ran the ladder, and the crazy part is, he did not disappoint since he was one of the fastest drivers in the history of F1. Finally, let's talk about Jenson Button, since he went straight from British F3 to F1 after massively impressing and winning the Macau Grand Prix, and Williams gave him that opportunity, and we all know how good he is since he was champion, and even to this day he's doing well in WEC. So clearly going from F3 to F1 ain't so bad, since all these guys were great drivers, and in the case of Max, generational. However, there have been many times where a driver has gone from an F3 equivalent to F1 and was suboptimal to say the least. And obviously, we have Lance Stroll, and you might say, how? He won a stupid amount of races and won F3 by so much. But see, that's the thing. When daddy owns the team and he gets you the best engineers, the best car, and literally tells the team to prioritize only you, as well as do everything possible to make you a champion in the series, winning by those gaps is kind of embarrassing, since if it was Max, Charles, or Lewis, I fear they would have won every single race in the season. Also guys, in terms of finding drivers who went from F3 equivalents to F1, there are very few, so a couple of these drivers may have raced faster cars than F3, but it would have been very brief, so sorry again. Anyways, next up we have Alex Yoong, and who is that you may say? Well, to be honest, I don't know, cause this guy was that bad. He was a paid driver, surprise surprise, and after some mediocre seasons of Formula 3, Minardi, being the very serious team they are, hired him for sponsors, in which he was slapped up and sent back home to Malaysia by Mark Webber. Who would have thought? Next up, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Taki Inoue, who participated in Japanese F3 and was spectacular to say the least. And his legendary performances saw him be scooped up by a random Formula 1 team, and he was so impressive, and he went on to win the championship by 500 points on the old point system. But sarcasm aside though, this dude was hot garbage, but at least he's a good sport about it. Finally, we have Andrew Tate, and he competed in Formula 3 machinery after getting his drive on merit, but he wanted to speedrun his career, so he paid Minardi a buttload of money, and boom, he was an F1 driver, and he was stunning to say the least. But for real, we know this guy was a joke, so let's just move on to the next point. So, should this be allowed? If drivers in F3 have such a massively dominant season where there was no competition, or if they demonstrated enough of an understanding with single-seaters and racecraft, should they just immediately go to F1 without doing F2? Well, in my honest opinion, I don't think so, for the most part. But in the cases of drivers such as Max or Kimi, where it's immediately evident just how good they are, then it should be allowed, but 90% of the time, it probably shouldn't. Now obviously, like I said and listed, there have been many drivers that skipped F2 and did perfectly fine. However, what is common in every driver that does this jump is one word: inconsistency. Whether it's inconsistent results, inconsistent racecraft, inconsistent speed, one thing is always going to be true, and that is, drivers who make that jump immediately may prove their worth later in their career, but their early career will be plagued by inconsistency. I think this really shows the importance of F2, since drivers that have come from F2 prove to be more consistent in not only their rookie years, but in their later years as well, compared to the F3 ones, where they have to spend some time first before developing consistency. Now obviously, the biggest reason why most teams promote the F3 drivers to F1 in the first place isn't because their talent is too much to lay waste in F2. In my opinion, the biggest reason they do this is to avoid the continued tomfoolery of the Mechachrome engine and just save their drivers some stress by giving them reliable machinery early. Imagine a reality where in GP2 in 2015, where Max Verstappen couldn't become a champion because of the Mechachrome lottery. That reality had a very high chance of coming true, since, like I just joked about, Mechachrome is a lottery, and sometimes from the perspective of the teams, it is just better to save the drivers some stress and just promote them to F1. However, like I stated, I don't agree, since inconsistent performances may destroy a driver's career, and maybe it would have been better had they just gone to F2 and got even more experience before F1. To put it simply, F3 drivers going straight to F1 is high risk and high reward. And there is what I think about the idea of F3 drivers going directly to F1. This video was inspired by Lindblad's performances so far, and while I don't think he is nearly that good enough to get the call-up straight to F1, it did make me remember about those such cases which led to the creation of this video. Like I said before, it's high risk and high reward, since at best, you get a fast, inconsistent driver, and at worst, you get a terrorist. So there's never really a case where a driver from F3 performs immediately on the jump compared to drivers from F2. Anyways, it should also be noted, everything I said is my own opinion. We all have opinions, and in my opinion, I am against these moves most of the time. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe since it would greatly help me in delivering better content, and let me know in the comments what you think of these moves, and as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.